welcome to In the Wake of Hate, Episode 1. We will be speaking with Michael Ruskin, author of The Vow, A Love Story in the Holocaust, which is the true story of his parents' experience of surviving the Holocaust. And today we're going to chat a little bit with Michael about being a child of Holocaust survivors. Michael, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Sandra. Great to be here.
It's nice to have you here. I would imagine that having parents who survived the Holocaust was probably a pervasive influence on your life. What would you say has been the biggest impact for you?
I would say it would be biggest impact, I would say, is their influence on me, their ability to exemplify the human spirit and the love they had for each other, and a connection that they had a great faith in God, as well as a courage and perseverance to overcome incredible odds to survive. And they took that right into their life, and they raised two wonderful children that grew up to be, I would say, quite successful at what they did or are doing. But as far as the actual influence on my life, I would say be supportive and kind and give back, as well as having love for myself, which I had to do because they were rather distant. And I didn't get a lot of positive stroking from them because they were shut down because of what happened to them during the war, their loss of their daughter, their loss of their families. And I truly believe that the only way they made it through the war was by not only their faith and their love for each other, but also the fact that once they got here, they were shut down emotionally because that's the only way they could have survived.
That makes a lot of sense. It sounds like a lot of your grit and determination and perseverance have come from, example from them. But that your compassion and your need to care for others and make sure you care for yourself was kind of more reactive from the environment that you grew up in. Would you say that it's impacted the way that you approach other people in daily life and communication?
Absolutely. I spent a number of years working on myself spiritually, and I realized the importance that you could only give from a full cup. And so I worked on myself for a long time, realizing the importance of giving back, the importance of supporting others. And so it's my purpose right now to do that. In addition to keeping my parents' legacy alive, it's also giving back to the community, either through working with the elderly or working with autistic children. And I have a great love for mankind, especially now, considering what's going on around the world. We'll never have enough love in our lives to give back. It's very, very important that we all do.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. And I think that, discussing stories like this and really understanding the impacts and the ripple effects, it's also a really important element to people understanding the importance of showing that compassion and understanding, and furthermore realizing that you don't always know what someone else is experiencing, and that you should approach situations with kindness and understanding. Did you know growing up that your parents were Holocaust survivors?
Yes, of course. But they rarely ever spoke about their experiences. It took quite some time for me to unravel their past, because the rare times they did speak, it was rather kind of fleeting, and they really didn't go into much detail. So I did a lot of my own research. I contacted the Holocaust Museum in Washington, as well as the Yad Vashem World Remembrance Center in Tel Aviv, to get a lot of this information. But of course, the main way I did get my information was through the documents I found in '93 after my dad passed away. And in those documents were information from the attorneys and the doctors explaining what happened to my parents during the war, which I didn't know about until I read those documents in '93. And that's when I realized, considering that 97% of the Jewish population of Lithuania is where the country they came from, were exterminated during the war. And the fact that only 4% survived, I realized how special they were, and that it was incumbent upon me as the last surviving member of my family to make sure their legacy lived, and I was going to use their experiences to help others understand the Holocaust.
That is beautiful. So you said you found these documents after your father had passed. Did it make a difference to you and a shift in how you saw things or felt about things to really understand the gravity of everything they went through?
Tremendously. I didn't realize when they were alive how special they were. I mean, considering of what they had gone through, the fact that they lived rather productive lives, raised 2 kids, gave us piano lessons at the age of 5, and were supportive in the sense of trying to push us to be our best. But yet, I found my mom to be a little bit on the critical side, to say the least, and a little bit overly protective. Because, I lost my sister at age 3.5 by the Germans. And when I was very young, my mother was very controlling and very overly protective, where there were points where she would wait for me in the schoolyard after 3 o'clock in the afternoon, getting off from work early to just walk me home hand in hand. While my schoolmates were all walking home with their friends, I was walking home with my mom. So that was a little bit much, but I could understand as I got older why she was so protective. And, they don't give instruction manuals to parents. You've got to figure it out on your own. And they did the best they could. And that's how they showed their love, was by being very protective and very controlling. And I believe because they went through the Holocaust, I could understand why they would, especially the fact that they lost their families. But
Oh,
on the flip
absolutely.
side, it was hard for me because I had to acclimate myself to my parents' behaviors, and it was not easy. Plus the fact, there was a generational gap and a cultural gap. I didn't speak English until I got into the 2nd grade. I was speaking Yiddish, and they had a very traditional Jewish household. And I was more interested in hanging around the candy store, playing with my buddies and playing baseball and football. And I didn't care what your ethnicity was or what your religion was. We were all in the same boat. And I say this, the same God that made me made you. And I believe truly that sometimes religion can keep us apart. We got to come at it from for me, a more spiritual perspective, but yet being Jewish is very important to me because it's in my blood and it was in my family. And I believe in the Old Testament. And so there's a combination of both. But to be coming from that side where my grandparents my grandfather's a rabbi. I came from a very religious family. It was a tough transition to make, considering the family I came from.
That's absolutely understandable. And I couldn't agree more. I think there's a huge value to understanding your heritage and honoring your heritage, whether that be the cultural pieces, the religious pieces. But I think that we can always take those pieces and use them to help us in understanding that, other people have different lives and different perspectives. And that, being able to use those things to bring us together rather than keep us apart is kind of the key to making sure that, wounds like this are healed, really. You mentioned the kind of high achiever and overprotectiveness and the things that you were struggling with as a child. Is this something that kind of impacted the way you were able to interact with your peers? And as you got older, is it something that was limiting for you?
I became very introspective. I spent a lot of time by myself because my mother was always hovering over me. So that alone time that I had as a very small child, I needed that for developing my own character. So I was shy as a child, and I'm glad I ended up going to college and getting away from my mom because it gave me the opportunity to grow, but it was still not easy. Even when I left for college, which was away from home, it was a blessing that I did that to really get into being who I am. Otherwise, if I had gone to school somewhere near my home in New Jersey, it would have been a whole different situation. Even to this day, I'm very introspective. I spend a lot of time going within to find the answers in myself rather than going outside myself, because you never will find those answers outside of yourself. It's all within. And that's one of the things my parents exemplified by the fact that they went within to realize that they were going to find each other, even though they were in separate concentration camps. When they made the vow before they were separated, when they were in separate camps for 9 months, that vow was, I think, the cornerstone of how they got back together, because they had a compelling future and they knew that they already saw each other together. And I say this to people, that you got to envision that it's already happened. And that's one of the things that I try when I meditate in the morning and I pray. I thank God for my prosperity and all the gifts he's given me that's already here. Rather than looking outside of myself, looking for it, I really believe that it's already in me and it's already in my life.
Yeah, I think that that is really, really important to really have that sense of things being something that you have authority over, that you are the one in control of how your life goes. I think that's a really, really strong characteristic that's able to help people overcome a lot of things. And I think that when you are able to tie that into the belief in something bigger than yourself and spirituality, God, creator, whatever it is that you believe in. I think that taking that autonomy and being able to also credit a higher power and understand that your mentality, the way that you handle things, the way that you expect things to go, is also tied into that same higher power and the way that things play out for you. And I think that spirituality plays a huge, huge role in people being able to achieve the things that they aim for.
I think the reason they survived was their belief in God, and they would never acquiesce to what was going on back then. It was very easy to give up. And I believe they never felt that to that point where they were giving up. And what you could understand, it was very difficult. Both my mom and dad didn't really know if the other one was still alive. They didn't even know if they'd find each other after the war, if the other person was still alive. They had to have faith to make it through to find each other. And of course they did. And that kind of gave them the willpower to keep moving ahead and then coming to this country and then building a life together, because they were destined to be together. And, they had a very special relationship that continued on for almost 55 years.
Yeah, and that is just it's one of my favorite parts of their stories, just that connection and that drive to be back together that kept them going through so much. And I think that, a level of that is spirituality and faith. But I think that there has to be some level of kind of who they were, their personality at the core, that they had to have both been incredibly strong-willed people to be able to make it through that and to continue to hold on to that faith and allow it to help them, find their way back to one another. And I think that there's got to be a lot of that was also taught and passed down within the family, that drive and that ambition. And, knowing you personally, I know that you have a lot of that grit and, what my grandmother used to call it, stick-to-itiveness, that want to stick to the things that you really believe in. I think that is absolutely a very admirable trait.
I think that's in my DNA. I mean, my brother was the same way. And, I'm very determined, and I have a lot of energy, and I have a lot of, I guess you call it, fortuitousness to continue on. And as you're talking, Sandra, I'm realizing what I mentioned before. When you realize that my parents came from a very Jewish background, a very conservative background, their vision of spirituality was very much influenced by their faith in the Old Testament and the Torah, and they were very close in the communities in Lithuania that were Jewish. So everybody in that area of connectiveness were Jewish. So their perspective to spirituality was really influenced by their Jewish heritage. When I came onto the planet, I picked up that part, but I also picked up the more spiritual part, where I'm looking at humanity as a whole. My purpose is to bring humanity together in love and in peace and to give back, regardless of what your faith is or what your ethnicity is. We're all in this together. And for them, that was hard, because for them to go outside of their faith was people that were anti-Semitic. They had a hard time going into that area because they were discriminated against, they were murdered. And so I can understand, coming from that place and coming to America, they would be very cautious and very, I wouldn't say, well, I guess you could say they were a little bit suspicious if you were someone they did not know. Now, when my friends came in who weren't Jewish, I mean, they really warmed up to all the people that came into the home. They were my friends. Some of them were friends of my brothers. My mother had a few friends that weren't Jewish, and they were very, very close. But it took them a while to really kind of trust, because of what they had gone through during the Holocaust.
Absolutely. I mean, I can imagine that being persecuted based on your beliefs would make you very hesitant of being close to anyone. And then the dynamic that was going on during the war of people that families believed that they could trust, their neighbors or, you know, their classmates, and then to be turned into the authorities, or just not helped when they needed help. I'm sure that creates an incredible lack of trust and concern about getting close to anyone who you don't feel is part of your community, and truly understands what you've been through. So I think that it's absolutely amazing that they were able to branch out and allow you guys to, you know, make friends outside of your faith, and, you know, to make friends within the community that were not part of their faith. That is just astonishing. And I would say that it would have been 100% understandable and forgivable if they had never felt comfortable doing that. So I think it just speaks, again, another layer to that level of grit and determination, and just that want to live life to the fullest, honestly. And I'm sure that a lot of the things that they experienced held them back from things that they would have been able to do otherwise. But it's absolutely incredible to me that they did manage to go on and have the full lives that they did.
Right. And the other thing is, I never really felt that, not to say I didn't feel anti-Semitism towards me, but it wasn't that, I mean, considering what's going on in today's world, with what's going on the college campuses today, it's a whole different situation. I grew up in a neighborhood that were Black, Hispanic, Jewish, Christian, all religions, and we were all close friends. And so it wasn't like me versus them. We were all these kids were in the neighborhood. We were all really close together. Italian, Polish. It didn't make any difference to me, and it didn't make any difference to them. This was the 50s and 60s. But what's going on now, it breaks my heart to say, it's a different ballgame. I mean, some of these Jewish kids can't even go to class because they're fearing that they're going to be assaulted. So it's a whole different game, and that breaks my heart. I never thought I'd see this at the level it is. It's like all around the world. So that's another reason why I'm out here, to try to reach people to understand the importance of love, and that's what it's all about. It's love. That's it. There's nothing more.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. I think that it just exemplifies the importance of getting messages like this out there. And I think that there are two layers to this. I think that on the one hand, there's the positivity and the good traits that came out of this, the success story that came out of this, and your ability to now go out into the world and be able to spread this message and have people understand that it's healing for us to come together, and that we don't want to go, backward into this division and hate that we're starting to see things slip into. But I think on the other side of it, there's also this need to have people understand that large scale events like this that inflict pain and trauma on groups of people, whether we're talking about Holocaust level or whether we're talking about, more local level of like a mass shooting. Okay. Those events, they aren't isolated just to the people that were victims. They're not isolated just to the community. These are things that end up being pervasive in the lives of the people that experienced those events, and they get passed down to their children and their grandchildren, because it changes the way that those people conduct their lives. It changes the way that they live and love. It changes the way that their kids grow up. It changes the way that their kids parent because their example is different from what it would have been. And the ripple effects just go out from there because it's going to change the way that those survivors interact in the community. For communities, when we're talking about, local things that happen, it's going to cause ripple effects that then go out through the entire community and alter the way that people interact with one another. And that can be a local community in the sense of a mass shooting, or it could be a cultural community in the sense of changing the course of how Jewish people in general interact with one another and with people of other faiths. And I think that it's really important to understand that these are not isolated things. We are not talking about survivor stories. It happened and it's done, and we're talking about history. We're talking about something that has had these ripple effects throughout time, and it's continuing to impact the way that people respond, right? So bringing it full circle back to what's going on college campuses right now, the reactions that we're seeing, they're still fueled by people's memories and personal experiences and cultural ties and heritage to these different sides of these stories. And they're going to continue to inform how we react. And I think it's really, really important to have these conversations and be handling things in an informed and compassionate and empathetic manner.
I agree totally. That was very well put. So we have to continue on this road. And that's my main purpose of writing the book, and also making presentations, and leaving people with the understanding that we should connect with one another and work together as family, as a community. I think in the end, what's going to happen is we will get there. In the end, we will build a community from what's going on. As what they say, from the ashes, we build another day, and we'll get there. But it's going to be tough, because the forces on the other side are very prevalent right now. And there's a lot of people out there that don't understand the history. And that's another frustrating situation for me, because there are times I'm trying to get onto the campuses to talk about my book, and they're afraid that it's going to cause too much controversy. The colleges are very, very cautious, as well as the high schools, about bringing people in to talk about history, which I think is very important. There's a lot of people out there that really don't know the history. And it's tough, and it all comes down to education.
Yeah, I think it's somewhat understandable that they would be cautious at this point in hosting events that could maybe kick up the protesting a notch, or even put people in danger if that's what they're concerned about. But I also think that there's huge value in being able to not only understand the history and be able to learn, but to hear other people's experiences. I think that beyond the history lesson, and beyond my opinion, your opinion, their opinion, beyond those lines that are drawn in the sand, I think that biggest value and the most importance is being able to actually listen to and embrace someone else's story, someone else's experience of how they saw things, how they felt things, and being able to, for a moment, allow yourself to see things from their perspective. And I think that that can be really difficult when there's a lot of emotion involved. It can be really difficult when there's a lot of controversy involved. But I really think that being able to share those experiences and set aside things long enough to see a person's experience from their point of view and step into their shoes for a moment is the path forward to being able to move past a lot of division. And it's a very, very difficult thing. I think that on an interpersonal level, when we're talking about people experiencing events like this, or people experiencing discrimination, there's always going to be some value that comes out of sitting down with a person who's had a very different experience from you, who's had very different beliefs and opinions from you, and being able to allow yourself to listen and absorb their point of view, even if just for a few minutes, and you can take away from it what you want. But I really feel like those are things that are life-changing when people are able to embrace them.
It's getting there. That's the hard part. Just be open to listening what the other side has to say. I mean, it's just something that you have to continue to work on, but Right now, there's a lot of division between so many people around the world. And I think people like us have a responsibility to do the best we can to bring more light to the planet.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. And I think that that this show is going to be a wonderful portal for sharing those stories. And I do really hope that as we get further into your story and as we're able to share other people's stories, that this is something that can reach a wider audience and not just people who already agree, so to speak, but people who maybe are hesitant to listen at first. I hope we'll be able to listen from the safety of their own homes with no one else even realizing that they're listening, and maybe learn something and maybe embrace a little bit different point of view and be able to shift some perspectives. And I really think that it's important to share these messages, because if one person watches and is able to understand something they didn't understand before, or embrace a perspective that they couldn't imagine embracing before, then it's made a difference. And that's absolutely the aim.
It's all about bringing people together and coming to them with facts that really are backed up by the truth.
Absolutely. And I think the best way to do that is to have it be personal experience. When we're talking about your parents' personal experience of the Holocaust, their personal experience of coming to the US and building a life here, your personal experience of growing up with them as parents, growing up Jewish, all of those things are personal experiences that aren't up for negotiation. And I think that this show being geared around those personal experiences it's a way to share things, not in a manner of let me give you a history lesson, and not in a manner of, these are facts that I found in this place or that place. These are personal experiences, which means that they're not up for debate, because this is how you experienced it. This is how your parents experienced it. And I think that has a really special power.
Yeah. And you got to come at it with respect for each other. The respect part is also very important. You can have a civil conversation without pointing fingers. That won't work.
Absolutely.
So, there's a lot of people like us out there, and we got to keep moving forward.
Oh, I agree. I think that there are a lot of forces and powers out there that are really invested in division. And I think that it's a big market for some people to make sure that people stay very divided, both within the US and on a global and cultural level. I think that it's honestly big business to keep people divided. It's a way to kind of fuel the fires and get people to align with you if you can keep them divided. But I think on another grander level, it's also the best possible distraction. And if you can keep people pitted against one another, then they're not paying attention to anything else. And if there is nothing else that people are able to unite on and for, I would think that realizing that a lot of this division is a distraction would be something that people can start to embrace and realize that this division, a lot of it has been created and manufactured for the purposes of keeping people focused on hating other people, when there are so many good things that we could all be doing in the world if we weren't so focused on this us and them, me and others kind of dynamic that we have going on.
That type of situation sells. The media, there's the social media, TV, division sells. I mean, it's news, and they want to keep that on the front page. And the more they show this division that's happening around the world, people are interested in hearing what's going on. And then, of course, they normally take sides. But, when you have good news, it doesn't sell. With the media, it just doesn't. But go on social media now, or going on the networks. It all sells because it's drama, and that kind of stuff always sells. And so, it gives ratings to the media world.
Absolutely. But, I think arguably, I think that the media also has a big hand to play with what sells. So when the media drives the clickbait train and wants everyone to hear about the newest controversy, then I think that's what becomes pervasive. But I think that when you have media that does try to tell the whole story, or media that is trying to promote the good things that are happening and the people that are striving for good, then it's also able to become more pervasive. And I know just personally, kind of for my own mentality, when I make a point to kind of cut off mainstream news and find those particular people who are reporting on the good things, the people that are reporting on nonprofits that are making headways and, charitable events that are happening, or just good news of things that have happened. When I can kind of shift gears and focus on that, just personally, it makes a difference in how I feel about things. So I think that overall feeling that there is an incredible amount of division is also based around the media's determination to focus on all of those dramatic and controversial and divisive things.
I definitely agree with you totally. So we got our work cut out for us.
Yes, we do. But I think that these amazing conversations will continue. And I think this is going to be a wonderful series. And, this is just episode 1 of season 1. So I'm very hopeful that this will be something that we can continue with, and that we can really not just build an audience, but build a community around. And I think that part will be absolutely huge and worth every bit of it.
Right, I totally agree. We're on a crusade, and I think we got a lot of exciting things ahead of us.
Absolutely. So just kind of some final notes here to wrap up for those of you listening. If you are the descendant of Holocaust survivors, or if you just have a strong interest and want to be supportive and be part of the conversations, we do have a Facebook group called Silent Legacy, which will be linked in the show notes if you would like to join. Just make sure that you answer the membership questions and you can come join us and continue the conversation there. Along with the fact that in the show notes, you will be able to find a link to Michael's website for the Vow, A Love Story in the Holocaust, where you can learn more about his book or purchase the ebook and print version. And also there is a section and a link there to be able to book Michael for appearances and speaking events if you're interested in having your own conversation with Michael. So thank you very much for joining me today. This has been a wonderful conversation, and I look forward to many more.
Thank you.